of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Chistero, Chapter 99, Saturday, Part 3. You know, I can't help but feel the show would see this as a teachable moment. Standing together, the group of balking bullies stood in a row before them, and the sensei of their Tokyo-based dojo, Todoroki, couldn't help his disappointed frown.
You're right, Hikayo-kun. However, aside from the obvious, I'm not quite sure what that would be.
The person they were previously degrading, however, was being fawned over by Eijiro and Suyu, at least.
Well, I say that they should apologize to Shoji first and foremost,
Gacha declared haughtily, whilst Rumi stood over him, her crimson eyes narrowed angrily, whilst Mirio crossed his arms and furrowed his brows.
I used to be someone like you guys, you know? I picked on people for stupid reasons, he announced, the kids blinking at him. And let me tell you, it's not only wrong, but really, really stupid. Shoji can't help his quirk any more than any of you can. But here he is, wanting to train, wanting to show what he's got, and that's his right as a person, the little blonde added before taking a step forward. What gives you the right to tell him not to, huh? How would you feel if a group of people you didn't know picked you out, made you feel all alone, and hated on you because of what you look like, huh?
Blinking, his neon blue eyes shifting from Takeo to Moto-sensei, Toshinori was really struggling not to coo, praise, and hug the formerly sullen little boy who was growing and becoming a fine leader with every passing day. He was pretty certain that in doing so now, with a line of downcast kids suitably reflecting on his words, whilst their teacher similarly looked on, would kind of dispel the lesson they were learning.
The young man speaks the truth, and is someone you should all look up to.
The wrinkled teacher, who was so much like Gran Torino, only with a cute long beard and mustache, and an award-winning smile, said, his old fight-toughened hand reaching out to ruffle the blonde Tat's hair affectionately.
I don't believe that Aizawa Shouta could have said it better either, Bakugo-kun.
He praised his ornate wooden stick, then jumping towards each of the suitably cowed children in turn.
Well, what are you waiting for, eh? That apology will go some small way to setting what's happened here today right, young people.
However, as a senior advisor and one of the judges of today's tournament,
I'm not sure if that'll be enough to prevent your disqualification,
he advised, his brows arching imperiously, balking, their heads snapping from each other to young man, who was now surrounded by the other members of the study group. The group bowed their heads. Sorry, they murmured, some of them in tears.
Let this be a lesson to all of you, he stated, and should any of you wish to use your talents and skills to become heroes, treating everyone you meet with kindness, respect, and understanding is paramount.
He furthered, some of them sneaking glances at him, their eyes momentarily widening.
What all of you did here this morning is the kind of thing I would expect to see amongst villains. Remember that.
Yeah, because sure he was incognito, but as the country's #1, this was part of his job too. For if Shouta-kun had taught him anything, it was that prevention was the best way to ward against people becoming criminals in the first place. Then the woman grumbling as her students in the Kyoto dialect, they all bowed once more before she ushered them away alongside Moto-sensei. The kindly old judge would escort them to the registration desk with young Mezzo so that they could discuss the next steps with a boy and his own teacher. Such a fine young man should never have been the target for such cruelty. No one should, but now the Tat's telling him to hurry back, Shoji-kun. He had a feeling that this was one of those rare situations where something good could bloom from something bad. They were all such wonderful children, weren't they?
My friends, I couldn't be more proud of you,
he told them, their little faces brightening further at his praise.
Now then, let's proceed to show young Ojiro our favorite cafe through all of our best photos. Oh, and perhaps you should all start stretching too, right? Shouta wouldn't want any of you heading off to your matches without being thoroughly warmed up now, would he?
At 9:45, the majority of the competitors had been registered. The 3 dojos were brimming with spectators, and Mirai and Kenji-san confirming that the Todorokis were en route. The stage was set, and the labors of 2 years' worth of planning to come to fruition.
Wow! Shoni! You look like a film star or something!
And that apparently wasn't all. Blinking and smiling fondly at the study group who'd come to greet him, their forms swiftly followed by his partner, siblings, Rumi, and two children he didn't recognize, Shouta ruffled Izuku and Katsuki's hair as they hugged his red silk-clad legs.
Thank you, Eiichiro-kun.
He replied to the grinning ebony-haired boy, his gaze sweeping over all of them as he was wont to do.
And I see that you've made two new friends.
He greeted with a friendly wave, the blonde and white-haired boys blinking up at him from where they were ensconced by the other tots.
Oh, yeah, Aizawa Shouta, this is Ojiro Mashiro and Shoji Bezo. Guys, this is Shoni.
Denki enthused, an arm looped around the tailed boy's shoulder, the other blushing cutely, his bandaged limb wagging a little, whilst the tallest child, bowing his head, offered up a severely quirked arm which formed a mouth.
It's nice to meet you, sir. It's a pleasure to meet the two of you as well.
He returned with his own little bow, his eyes desperately trying to avoid any kind of contact with his fiancée, whilst wearing the crimson golden dragon emblazoned clothing, his long hair providing him no shelter, since he'd scooped it back up and into a neat bun atop his head.
So, shall we make our way to the main stage? The competitors have front row seats to the opening performances, after all.
He grinned, whilst inclining his head to where everyone else was heading.
Yay! Let's go!
Chuckling at their enthusiasm, he began to lead them away, his ears picking up the conversations behind him. The eatery owner couldn't help but smile. Such good kids.
Shouta-kun, if I may.
Blinking, he dared to tilt his head up at his partner, those neon eyes smoldering, whilst they mingled into the crowd of chatting, smiling, and mock punch-throwing martial artists.
You look, please don't.
He whispered, his cheeks flaming, as the man edged further and further into his personal space, that smile enduring, a head sneakily snaking to intertwine with his own.
I need to stay focused. Oh, I know.
The other murmured, his voice deepening a little, as those soft, thoroughly kissable lips ghosted near his flushed ear.
You're professional to a fault, kitten.
Oi! Tilting his head to look behind him, the 23-year-old let out a surprised chuckle to see Takeo right behind him, a displeased look on his face which was mirrored by Hitoshi and Nato, the pair safely secured in the golden-eyed man's arms. Save that kind of thing for the honeymoon, mister. Our brother's got enough on his plate today without you, making him all flustered. You hear? He snipped, that heated look causing the number one to laugh nervously and stamp away.
Takeo-kun, yes, you're right, of course.
He furthered, whilst rubbing the back of his neck, those sun-kissed cheeks blushing.
Sorry, Shouta-kun.
Laughing right along with him, his eyes rolling fondly, he patted the other's sizable bicep before winking at the trio behind them, his smile proud. Damn, what did he ever do to deserve such a wonderful family? Holding his mother close, a quiet hush falling over the kanji wall scroll-accented room. Bobby felt his teeth gritting despite his partner's calming hand upon his shoulder and Spinner's steady, assuring presence from behind the sofa he and his parents sat on as a large people carrier pulled up to a quieter side entrance to the Budokan. Only the best for Endeavor. Alpha Squad? Sansa said into the radio he held, his eyes narrowing as he stood next to the monitors. Please be advised that the target is reached checkpoint A. Then, his own turquoise eyes narrowing, he felt a tremor run through his tensed, anxious body as the chauffeur hopped out of the driver's side door and pulled the sliding door aside to allow the towering white key-covered body of Todoroki Enji to exit the vehicle.
Roger that, base. We're moving into position. Beta, Charlie, and Delta are also standing by.
Now Masa replied over the slight crackle of radio waves. That ever-present scowl, the military-styled haircut, distant glower that just screamed, I have a god complex, were still there. The back of his top was emblazoned with a symbol for fire in rich navy threads, and since he was a civilian presently, his angular jawline didn't host that ridiculous flame beard. Fuck! Aside from the outfit with its wide, broad ebony belt, he looked exactly the same. Even his stiff, reserved posture hadn't changed. Fuyumi? Blinking, the cold hand of his mother squeezed his own. Dabi swallowed thickly as his little sister, his only sister by blood, stepped out of the car with a woman the police force had identified as her private tutor and au pair. Look how grown up she is. Ray murmured quietly, her eyes tearing even as Inko and Mitsuki cuddled her whilst Mimi-chan passed over a handkerchief for her to use. God, he barely recognized her. She was wearing glasses now, and her beautiful features were closed off, reserved. There was no smile on her lips, and her body was wrapped in a similarly white gi, which offered a blue belt. Her hair was now scraped back into a high-top ponytail. That bastard! That utter bastard! Had he broken her spirit, robbed her of what little precious childhood she had as one of the 3 failures he desired?
Dabby, breathe. You need to breathe, all right?
Sucking in a breath, he momentarily snapped his eyes to the man he loved, those crimson irises glinting with a protective light, a gloved hand reaching to gently cup his cheek.
This is the end of it, all right? He'll never hurt them again after today,
He soothed.
and I can't imagine how hard this is for you. But try to stay patient, just for a little longer.
He advised while Spinner squeezed his other blazer-covered shoulders.
The fucker will pay for everything he's done.
The gecko quirk user promised quietly.
And it's gonna be done by the book, too, you know? There'll be no escape from that.
He added, his mouth opening to say something else before Ray's gasp returned their attention to the 3 screens set up before them, the middle monitor trained on the car. Is that Natsuo? Blinking, Dabi felt his brows reach for his hairline as the white-haired 11-year-old exited the vehicle with a scowl on his face, a purple belt tied across his waist, and stiff arms roughly folded across a chest that seemed too broad for a boy of his age. And he was tall. Really tall. Well, he may not have inherited their father's quirk, but he'd definitely taken after him physically. He was at least 5'6". He had not reached that height until he was 16. Oh no, Shouta? Screwing his eyes shut at his mother's whimper, the flame quirk user moved to wrap her up in his arms, her floodgates opening as she pressed her face into his neck and sobbed. For there, his young face ruthlessly neutral, a purple belt wrapped over his gi, stood Todoroki Shoto, his crimson bangs fanned over an angry reddened patch which surrounded his turquoise eye as he stared dispassionately at the doorway Angie had strode through without so much as a glance back at his children. Then 2 more nannies, leaving the car, both loaded with kit bags and tiredness. The children were also ushered inside. There was no talking, no laughter, no communication of any kind. It was like they weren't children at all. How could he do that to them? It's gonna be okay, Mom, he whispered into her hair, his own body quaking as memories he'd tried to suppress, tried to forget for so long, started to resurface. It's going to be okay. Kneeling between Kachan and Hitoshi, Izuku sucked in a calming breath and let it out. It was 10 o'clock, and by his calculations, that meant the Todorokis would be entering the main hall any second now. There had been times, especially after that awful visit to the doctor who told him he was quirkless, that he'd cried himself to sleep at night because he longed for his father to be there, to tell him that everything was going to be okay, to tell him that he was loved, valued, and worthy regardless. He'd prayed that Midoriya Hisashi would return, or failing that, his mother would remarry. He had been so hung up on the idea that he'd failed to realize that the ideal father he longed for was something that children with dads would long for too. That some children had been born awful parents. Parents who hurt them in ways that no one, not even big strong adults like Dad might, should have to face. It was funny, not in a humorous way, to think that he'd been jealous of every kid with a father because now the horror of what Dabini had lived through having dawned across his mind for months, he was so glad it had just been him and his mom. Well, until Shoni, until Toshiji, Muraiji, Nezuchi, and his older brothers and sisters had come into their lives and shown him what family truly was. What family should be, and that's why, as he sat there, his emerald eyes trained on a door opening in the distance, he sent out a silent message past the hulking, grim-faced form of Endeavor to the children quietly marching behind him. You don't know me, he thought, his little hands balling into fists. But you're going to. And you can be mad. You can try to push me away. But no matter how long it takes, no matter how hurt you are, I'm going to be there for you, he told them, his resolve strengthening.
Uh-oh, I think he's got that fiery, intense friendship look again. Only good can come from this. Blinking, he looked to Mirio-senpai as he leaned over him, their other friends chuckling, whilst Ochako hugged his right arm and Nato ruffled his hair.
Well, those Todorokis won't know what hit him, eh? The blue-eyed copy quirk user enthused. You sure as heck did a number on me, you know?
Smiling at all of them, Izuku breathed out a "Yoosh!" then had them all laughing before the flashing lights above them instructed the room at large to quieten down, to settle and readjust themselves into the former kneeling positions which a ceremony of this caliber required. For the opening ceremonies were now underway.